how important is a father's impact in his children's faith relationship with God and them growing up as Catholics? Hello, my name is Christina and welcome to my channel if you're new here, and welcome back if you've been here before. If you haven't yet, please click the subscribe button down below and click on the bell so that YouTube will send you notifications whenever I have a new video up. And also, if you could click the like button if you like this video, that would be greatly appreciated, so that way YouTube knows to suggest it to other people. Now this video is going to be on a book by Tyler Rowley called Because of Our Fathers. And I actually found out about this book because Tyler got a hold of me and asked me if I was interested in reading it, and I was like, absolutely, especially once I kind of read the synopsis of what this book was about. This book is definitely a great read, well worth the time, and I'm so happy he contacted me about it because of that. Especially lately, you hear a lot about men needing to be men, the lack of masculinity in men these days, and the way the culture sort of demonized what being a man is about. And he counters that really well in this book. The book is a compilation of stories from various people. Like on the cover here, he shows, if you can see that. Some of the people are Bishop Strickland, Patrick Madrid, Abby Johnson, Father Paul Scalia, which, by the way, was my favorite of all the stories. Father Rocky, Matt Burke, Jesse Romero, Mary Hassan, Father Gerald Murray, and he just goes on. There's a total of 23 chapters and then a conclusion. And he's an excellent writer, and he really knew how to introduce this topic for his book. He starts out with a story about Rick Santorum going to visit Pope John Paul II and the impact that visit had on Rick Santorum, because while he was there, he was recognized as an important man. And he kept saying, no, not important, not important. He's like, yes, important man. He wasn't important because of his political status in the U.S. He was important because he was there with his 4 kids, teaching them the faith. And the Pope recognized the importance, the necessity, the impact that a father has on his kids and on them growing in the faith. And actually, as you read into the introduction, he gets into the statistics of the impact that fathers have versus mothers on their kids and their faith. And it's not that moms don't have an impact, but the impact of the father and his faith and his demonstration of the faith, it's just more profound. I mean, dads are the priests of the family. As head of the household, they have authority of their family, much like a priest has in the parish. In fact, the priest at my parish, he's talked before about how bishops have more authority than the priest does, so fathers are actually more like bishops of the household. They have authority for blessings in their families. They teach their kids. They demonstrate the faith. And it's the fathers demonstrating the faith to their kids that lays the foundation for their kids having the faith. Not that moms don't, but more so. And in fact, he brought up the statistics on page 25 here. It says, when the father and the mother are regular churchgoers, 33% of their children are regular, 41% of their children are irregular, and 26% of their children are non-practicing. The following results indicate what happens when the father is a less faithful churchgoer than the mother. When the father is an irregular churchgoer and the mother is a regular churchgoer, 3% of their children are regular, 59% of their children are irregular, and 38% of their children are non-practicing. When the father is non-practicing and the mother is a regular churchgoer, 2% of their children are regular, 37% of their children are irregular, 60% of their children are non-practicing. When the father is a regular churchgoer and the mother is irregular, 38% of their children are regular, 38% of their children are irregular, 25% of their children are non-practicing. And when the father is a regular churchgoer and the mother is non-practicing, 44% of their children are regular, 22% of their children are irregular, and 33% of their children are non-practicing. I mean, just looking at those statistics, you can see how important the father's role is. He's given a position by God to lead the children in the faith and to lead the children to God. Our earthly father is supposed to lead us to our heavenly Father, and he sets the example. In fact, when fathers fall away, their children are also more likely to fall away. Now, that doesn't happen in every instance, but you're going to see it a lot more than if the father is faithful in the faith and in following God. Now, like I said, there were some really phenomenal stories here. And, you know, I can't deny it. There are stories in this book that made me cry. Just you read about them and you get all choked up at the effort and the demonstration of the dads. And I'd have to say that of my favorite stories, after reading through them, nothing topped really for me Father Paul Scalia's story and the impact and the demonstration that his father, which you probably know who he is, he was the Supreme Court Justice Scalia, Anthony Scalia. And I think part of what stuck so much in my head was the story about when Pope John Paul II came to America and he made sure to get his kids there to see the Mass, and they were way up in the nosebleeds. And his father picked him up, put him on his shoulders, and gave him his opera glasses so he could try and see. And all he could see was this kind of like white blur. But he knew that his father had popped him up on his shoulders, which he normally doesn't do in Mass, and gave him his expensive opera glasses so he could just catch a glimpse of the Pope. And I thought, wow. I mean, it's a demonstration of priorities, that his father made sure that they got there. They were in the nosebleeds, but they were there. And to have his son holding his really expensive glasses that, if he dropped them, they could break, but he didn't care because they wanted to make sure that his son got to see the Pope. And it's sort of a awestruck moment for me. And, I mean, Bishop Strickland's story of his father, which his father was actually Baptist and converted to the faith. And every time they moved, he made sure that there was a Catholic church available for his family and for his wife. And in one of their moves, they went to an area where the Catholic churches were non-existent. And so he, with a couple other people, appealed to the bishops, I believe it was, and asked to try and get some sort of Catholic church, Catholic service available for them. And sure enough, they were able to, in the basement of this place, to have Mass. And, that was at least until a church could be built, but it's like his father made sure it happened. He made sure that Mass was available for his wife and kids. And so, I mean, that was just an awesome example to me of what fathers can do. And that was Bishop Strickland's story. And it was kind of funny to me that his father was actually a convert to the faith, which there were a few parents in these stories that were converts. Most of them were, I think, the moms that were converts, but there were a few dads that were converts, and I mean, they just really led their kids well. And the last story in there, I gotta say, I finished that one up last night, and it really made an impact on me, the kind of sacrifice that the dad made for his kids, one in particular especially. And I was sitting and eating dinner, and my husband looked at me, and I was like, he's like, what's going on? I was like, I just had this story in my head from what I read of this, this one particular dad. And so, I mean, I've been sharing snippets of the book with my husband all along as I've been reading it, as I was like, wow, I was like, you've got to read this chapter, you've got to read this chapter. And I told him about that part of the chapter that I'd read, and then later on as I was reading, he's like, what are you crying about now? And I'm like, it's just so sweet. And I read it to him, and it was like I'm choking up all through it, but it was beautiful that a dad was so willing to lay down his life for one of his kids. Which brings to mind Father Gerald Murray. He's in here as well. And just the story of the example his father set for him when he was, I think he was 6 or 7 years old in his chapter. And he talks about how his father was going to Mass, to daily Mass, not just Sunday Mass, but daily Mass. And so he makes a point to his dad about how we're Catholic. We don't have to go to church on any day except for Sunday. And his father made the point to him of he loved Jesus so much that he wanted to see him and be able to receive him every day. And it was that kind of devotion and dedication and love that really inspired Father Gerald Murray, and just that's what set the example. His father's love and commitment to Jesus set the example for him. And that's just, it's a resonating theme in this book. All these stories, there are dads that are just so vehemently pro-life, and their kids see it because their work is pro-life. And one of the common threads I noticed that was repeated among the various stories, remember, each person wrote their own story about their dad. And one of the themes I noticed that kept coming up was their dads had a love for the truth. That they knew that the truth was just one solid thing. It's not, oh, well, there's your truth and there's my truth and there's this truth. No, there's the truth. And it was their love of the truth that compelled them in their faith, and they wanted to instill that in their kids. The love of the truth. We know who the truth is. And just, it's really a phenomenal book, and there were some that I'd not heard of before. I think I'm pronouncing his name right, but I'm not sure, but particularly the story about Richard F Collier Jr. I think I'm pronouncing his name right, but I'm not positive. But I'd never heard of him before, but wow. I mean, that was just one of those stories that as I read, he was so vehemently pro-life, and the pro-life cause was so important to him. It was just like up to one of the very last things that he did. Another common thread that I noticed in a lot of these stories, the Rosary. These dads, so many of them, had a dedication to the Blessed Virgin that no matter what, there was the daily family rosary every day. And in times of crisis, they turned to the rosary, and they turned to Mary, and they asked for help, and they asked for strength. And they instilled it in their kids. In fact, in the last story, that was one of the points that was made about how when tragedy struck, one of the sons immediately turned to his rosary because his father had instilled that in him from the daily family rosary. Before all activities happened, whether it was a game or a practice or any sort of function, there was the family rosary. And I thought, wow, look at that. Look at what he instilled in his son. Even if his son was all grouchy and didn't want to do it at the time, it instilled that deep in him. So that way when tragedy did strike, he immediately turned to the rosary and to the Blessed Virgin. Funny enough, while there are many of the stories in here that are by priests about their dads, one of them was Father Jerome T. Karcher, which it's funny because as I read it, he talks about how his father was the one who started Carl's Jr., which is a restaurant in California, and I'm familiar with it. So as I was reading along, I'm like, wow, I had no idea that he was a Catholic, that a Catholic guy had started Carl's Jr. And it's funny because, like I said, this is a priest writing about his dad. So there are at least 5 priests in this book writing about their dads and the influence their dad had. And obviously that's a strong influence when a dad produces a priest. At the back of the book, in the conclusion, he talks about how while not every dad demonstrates the faith and lays a good foundation for their kids, there's part of the book that applies to that, which I have to say I agree. This book is not only for those who are already really great dads leading their kids in their faith, it's a good inspiration and guide for dads who aren't certain of how to, they haven't maybe found their way. It's a great example for that man who's searching, that wants to know how to be a man and how to lead his family and how to lead his children. There are so many examples in here that these men set, not like saying point by point by point, do this, do that, do the other, but by their example and reading their stories, you see how the fathers influenced their kids. And so it's not only good for the dads who aren't sure how to but want to. It could reaffirm the dads who are doing it and they just want to know that they're leading in the right way because of the examples that are set by these other dads, what they need to do. But it's also a great book for those who don't have dads that lead them in the faith, that maybe have fallen away from the faith, were never in the faith, or just don't care about the faith anymore at all. It's really good for those people too, because you can see the example in this book of what a dad and a man should be. And I think, if nothing else, that makes this book so worth reading, because it sets the example. It is counter to what's going on in the culture right now, how everyone's saying, oh, toxic masculinity, and about how men shouldn't really be men. No, men absolutely need to be men. It's crucial to the survival of the family for a man to be a man and to lead his kids and to lead his family. The stories in this book are such an inspiration that this book is really it's a wonderful guide. The stories are lovely and they're inspiring and they're encouraging, and it's a must read, I think, for pretty much anyone, because even if you have a fantastic dad, it could remind you of your father. If you're trying to lead a family and you're not sure how to do it, you're not sure how to be the head, the stories in here of what these men did will be such an inspiration to you. And if you're an adult and you didn't have a dad that really guided you in the faith, or was never really in any sort of faith, wasn't Catholic, or just kind of shucked off the Catholic faith, hearing these stories, reading about what these men said and did, will inspire you and give you an example to lead you. Now, one of the things I did notice is Father John Ricardo talks about how a strong marriage is key to raising kids in the faith and demonstrating the faith to them. And he talks about the 7 keys to a thriving marriage. And this is some of the stuff that he teaches to couples during marriage counseling. And the paragraph goes, "Since it is virtually impossible for me to think about my father without thinking also of my mother, I'd like to offer what I have come to call the 7 keys to a thriving marriage that I learned from them and that I share over and over with couples. The first one is, build your marriage on self-sacrifice." And his mother wasn't a Catholic when she married his dad. She ended up converting, but he led her in the faith, and it's really beautiful how he did. The second key is anticipate that things will get better. Not easier, but better. And, I mean, that's very true. In marriage, things don't necessarily get easier, but they get better. And that's just sort of how it's designed. The third key is never, ever, ever keep score. Everybody is competitive, even those who appear to be the gentlest and kindest. Keeping score is for sports, not for love. It is absolutely crucial for a couple to turn their competitive juices into outdoing the other and showing honor and kindness, affection, and love. The fourth key, forgive. Everything immediately, no matter what. As the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. Colossians 3:13. The fifth key, if the Lord should bless you with children, remember what children need most. More than anything else, even more than they need to know that they are loved, children need to know that their mom and dad love each other. This is one of the many reasons why couples need to make time regularly to go out on dates alone. When kids see their parents enjoying one another and being together, they feel safe. When they do not, kids begin to feel as though everything around them is crashing down. The sixth key, model the faith for your children. It is often said that with regard to faith, parents set a kind of glass ceiling through which children rarely pass. The seventh key, never forget the point of marriage. Every sacramental marriage is an arranged marriage, for Jesus says, "What therefore God has joined together, let no man put asunder." These are the impressions that have been made by dads on their kids. And he really highlights how important they are. So men, be a father and a head to your family the way that God is to the church. And let the stories of these men inspire you to be that. Now, that's not to say women shouldn't read this, because I did and absolutely loved it. because I could see how a father should lead. And it was beautiful to see how these kids, men and women alike, loved their dads and how they learned the faith and were strong in the faith because of their dads. So again, Parent Recommended Enough Because of Our Fathers by Tyler Rowley. I highly recommend it. Tell me what you think about the review, and if you're interested in reading it, and if this review maybe inspired you a little bit to get this book and read it too. And in the meantime, please click the subscribe button down below if you haven't. Click the like button if you liked this review. I certainly appreciate it. And I'm going to have another book coming up hopefully soon that I'm getting ready to read. And in the meantime, I will see you in my next video.